Okay, so let's move back to the wizard page, which again, that's where you're going to spend the bulk of your time. And we're going to look at what we've populated in here for this very simple exercise as it relates to the restaurant that we're going to create. So we're making the assumption that we are an entrepreneur that's getting ready to start a restaurant operation. So what we've done in here is we've populated within the major drivers section driver number 1, which we're calling restaurant operations. And as we saw, that shows up on the P&L, the cash flows, as the line in the P&L. So we enabled you to come in and identify the different chunks. You might have some associated with meals. You may have a section called alcohol, the cost of different objects that are being served in the bar. You might have some other things that you want to capture, but we've got 2. Okay, and as it relates to meals, we've come in and we've identified the number of days in a month, and we've populated that for each of the months. We've identified the number of customers that are going to be coming into the restaurant each day, and the cost of the food that each person's going to buy. And then we've made the decision that here the cost that the restaurant will spend is half of the rest. So you've got the ability to customize this based on whatever assumptions you want to put in place. So we've just calculated a very simple formula here to multiply the number of days in a month by the number of customers per day, by the number of dollars each customer spend to create our revenue, and in terms of the cost, we've done the same calculation. So we provided a very simple interface to create the calculation, to create the revenue and cost, and everything is then picked up based on those 2 calculations, rolled up to the top, and rolled into the balance sheet, profit and loss statement, and the statement of cash flows. So you have the opportunity to write a very simple formula, and we write complex formulas in the background. And then you can see we've copied that formula over across the months. We've kept that fairly stagnant as the months go on. But you would actually spend more time thinking through how much revenue a customer is going to provide and what the cost of those meals would be in your model. Then, as you go down through this, what you're going to see is we've started to increment the number of restaurants that we're going to have in place. So in our scenario, we assumed that back in month 1, or in year 1, we had 1 restaurant. And we built out our profit and loss statement for that 1 restaurant based on 1 restaurant. But after a year, we decided we're going to open up a 2nd restaurant. And so to make this easier, you can continue doing the planning for 1 individual restaurant up here. But for restaurant number 2 and all the incremental restaurants that we add into our model, we do those calculations down here. And you can see that once we're at 13, we said, okay, now we're going to have 2 restaurants. The revenue is going to be based on the revenue that's being generated in restaurant A, which is the $23,000 for meals plus the $29,000 for alcohol, multiplied by the number of restaurants that we have in place. And that then gives us the incremental revenue associated with the 2nd restaurant. So we're planning based on 1 individual restaurant, but then we can use for B to pick up the revenue and cost that's going to come from the incremental restaurants we've put in place. And then you can see that we grew our plan, and we started adding restaurants more frequently as the months went on, just based on this line. So this is really flexible functionality to enable you to do pretty aggressive and thoughtful analysis of your business without having to worry so much about how to keep all the statements in sync and make sure all the formulas are appropriate. As it relates to other sections, we've left driver CD empty in this example. We've populated operating expenses primarily with people. As it relates to cost of services in a restaurant, that's going to be your primarily other cost. We've got selling expenses that we've decided are 5% of revenue. A simple calculation to pick up. So instead of having to think through complicated month by month, how many restaurants do I have, etc., we've leveraged the functionality to just say it's going to be 5% of revenue is what we're going to spend on marketing and advertising. And then when you get down into the G&A costs, you've got the ability to do some pretty flexible building based on the number of restaurants you have, the cost per restaurant, and you can build that functionality pretty straightforward fashion just based on these sections. As it relates to the people section, We talked about this in the last video. We've got the different types of people that you might have. You've got people for each one of the drivers. Those drivers are pre-populated based on what you selected above. So in this scenario, we've got staff, we've got a manager, and all that information is then calculated based on the assumptions you put in place. When we get down through the selling costs and the G&A costs, we've got the different people that we may want in our restaurant. When you get to the balance sheet section, we talked about this in the last video. You can have an accounts receivable formula. You can base that based on the revenue is being generated based on the customers coming in, and that will then affect the balance sheet. As it relates to payables, you can build that formula based on your overall spend, and you can make the assumption that you're going to pay people 30 days of expense been incurred, or whatever assumption you want to put in place, and you can build that here. Taxes, debt, equity, this would be based on what's happening within your business associated with when people are going to be investing money in the business, when you might take an investment from external investors. And as it relates to the asset section, you can document in here what assets you need to buy, what month you're going to buy them, how much they're going to cost, and then depreciation is going to be picked up automatically. So if we go through the statements, what we'll see is we've got, based on the major drivers we put in place, the revenue by major driver, we've got the cost by major driver, any other costs based on that G&A section. It runs down through income. You can see some check totals here at the bottom. If you ever see a check total that doesn't zero out, let us know. We'll help you get that fixed, but we haven't seen that so far. On the cash flows, this is really important. It enables you to see what cash you're going to have at the end of each period, and you'll find that ties exactly to your balance sheet. That's really important because you may have a P&L that generates a lot of revenue, but if you don't have cash, you're not going to be able to run your business. So this is a really important statement to understand. It's hard to create, and it's hard to make sure it ties to the P&L of the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is going to give you the financial debt associated with your assets, liabilities, and equity, and you'll see that that's automatically populated. And once again, best part about this tool, everything is print ready. We'll do a print preview on this, and we're going to see that it breaks out by year, and then we've got a summary for the whole period. And we've got that for each one of the three statements. So we've got a cash flow and a balance sheet that are going to show the same type of information. And again, this is an important touch because it makes it easy for our investors to understand the financial component of the business, and it puts the entrepreneur in the position of being able to very easily explain what's happening within the business, what assumptions they made. They can go back to this wizard page, and they can walk the investor or the banker through all the associated with all the assumptions. So thanks again. If you want to ask us any questions, send a note, fill out the feedback page, and we'll get an answer to you.